This is the most significant moment in American history since World War II.
It is?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you look through American history, you have the Revolution, you have the Tea Party and everything from 1776. That was
Okay, I remember
significant. Ben
that.
Franklin. You
I
remember
remember
that.
that. Yep.
Then you had the Civil War. I was maybe the most significant event in American history, which you might have heard of.
Heard of it.
Yeah. And then you had World War One and Two, also notable. And you had 1989, which was a sort of a moment where the world went from having multiple great powers competing for influence. And then in 1989, it became one single great power with total domination of the entire world. I mean, I'm being slightly hyperbolic.
You mean U.S. domination?
Yeah, the U.S. domination was consolidated into total domination in 1989. And that basically the Cold War, the U.S. won the Cold War, to speak in a very literal sense.
Okay, sure, I'll give you that.
So since 1989, so you had a sort of you had multiple spheres of influence in the world: British pound, Russia, China, and then the Americans. And you have the shift from that consolidated group to the singular power that is the United States in 1989.
Okay. I'm with you so far.
It's now 2025. And by all appearances, the new president of the United States is behaving in a way and isn't acting in a way where he appears to be acting in a way, I should say, and I think it's broadly accepted, that is returning to a multipolar world, that the United States is no longer the single arbiter of all that exists and all that is power in this world, but that the United States is a very powerful and perhaps even the most powerful actor in the world, but that also China is a very powerful actor in this world and must be acknowledged as such, and they have their sphere of influence. And India is a very powerful actor in this world, has a sphere of influence. And for that matter, Russia, particularly in the context of this moment. Anyway, it's a long way of my saying we're transitioning from a singular point of power to multiple points of power. Which, again, this is not a political podcast. I'm not here to offer a big political analysis. But what I am saying is, because you and I talk, and you've really been made this point very clearly, is that the U.S. is the deepest, most significant, most important capital market in the world. The U.S. dollar is obviously the dominant currency. It is the currency of the world. And I'm interested in whether you have a point, what your perspective is on the change in the relevance or value of the U.S. dollar, or the change in the value or the liquidity or the existence of the U.S. capital markets as we transition from a single point of power, a hegemon, a unipolar world, whatever word you want to use, as we transition to a more multipolar world, and its relevance to markets in general, and is it even a tradable thing? Or is it all risk? Is there upside? I mean, it's just a new way of, we've lived in a world where there's been one point of influence for 36 years or whatever it is.
Well, it's one point of influence because he who writes the checks gets to make the call, essentially, right? That's what this is about. That's what this whole discussion is. He who pays the bills gets to make the call. He who writes the checks, however you want to say it, gets to make the call. So, that's been our role on a global scale, and that's where we are today. Or I'm sorry, that's where we.
And America's now saying we're not writing all these checks. USAID. You know what's going on.
The new narrative. I'm I'm not exactly sure that this is the platform that this administration was elected on. It was more of, I feel like the platform was immigration and lower prices. The platform wasn't necessarily that we are going to stop being the leader of the free world type thing. But I think that was, there was a certain amount of, chatter about that. But the whole concept of make America great again, the whole concept of, of we're going to take care of ourselves first and then we're going to take care of everybody else. I think you're asking, is this good? Is it sustainable?
Or does it change the fundamentals of trading? I mean, what I really think about when I see it is Tom always makes the point that the United States is the deepest, most liquid, it's the most reliable contract law. It's got the deepest capital markets. The thing that's different between America and every country in the world, that. China, Russia, Spain, Germany.
So I feel very strongly on this topic because I don't think. There's no doubt in my mind that the world's heading towards digitization. Technology is by definition, as technology advances, it's by definition it distributes, it disseminates, being able to digitize everything and for everything to be traded and integrated together. So what happens in a world of advancing technology is everything becomes much more global, not less global. Everything becomes more integrated, not less integrated. Everything becomes more decentralized and less centralized, okay? So that is just the nature of technology. And what we're doing right now is we're essentially saying, just think about this for a second. Is there ever a world? Can you ever think of an example, okay, where he, and I'm only saying he, but it could be he, she, whatever, he who takes care of himself first and only takes care of himself and doesn't take care of those around you to make everything a better place ever comes out on top?
Okay. Yes. So,
that's the basic.
Okay, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
That is, everything from goodwill to human nature to, to being a good person, the whole concept. Or, if you don't share, if you have everything and you don't share, and sharing is defined lots of different ways, all you can do is set yourself up for failure. There is no other outcome.
Right. Okay.
I mean, it can always revert back. Since we're in a democracy, at least for now, everything can revert back to the way it was because obviously elected parties can lose. They can, things can go back to the way it was and things like that. But you do run the risk of true disruption. I think the marketplace has made some very bold statements in a very short period of time, especially the fact that the US dollar in the last week has basically crashed. Now, that's not a surprise to me because I've been bearish on the US dollar for, years now, just because it's been in a bull market for 15 years. It needed to crash. But versus a lot of other currencies, we've basically seen the US dollar in crash mode right now. That is not a crazy coincidence. Yes, it was overpriced, but just because you brought up US dollar, the US dollar is in crash.
Well, I mean, that's sort of
US dollar is in crash mode. US volatility is, up at ridiculous levels, and the US stock market has been in trouble, but it's just, it's rallying a little bit this afternoon. I think this adds an element of risk. I think this approach is very short-sighted, and it adds an element of risk that we haven't seen in a long time. Now, again, it's early. We're only couple weeks into whatever you want to call this. We're only a couple weeks into this. And so lots of things can change and people can come to their senses and this and that. But, it's.
But I mean, from a trend, would you buy the dollar on this dip?
No.
Would you?
No.
Would you get short the dollar on the break lower?
No, I would get short the dollar in any rally.
Okay.
I'm already.
You're already there.
I'm already there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm already there. Yeah.
All right. So let's just, because this is sort of like because normally this would be like, oh, well, who's going to be the president? Who's going to be prime minister? But that's not what we're doing here. We're doing money.
Yeah, sure. We're doing money.
The underlying thing that's happening on the earth, without question, the underlying thing that is happening on the earth is total integration of people. Transportation, technology, live video between countries, currency, efficient payment flow of payments across borders and across currencies, to total unification and integration of that was a total increasing integration and unification of all humans and human assets. The American policies are designed to slow that down. Right, a tariff is a policy to create friction between international transactions. And I know this is not a tariff discussion, but there are those who think that it's good for the United States to no longer be financially responsible for policing the entire world.
Of course there is.
And bring more resources home to America.
Of course. I understand that.
And so, and for that matter, that tariffs are good for the dollar.
Well, tariffs are obviously not good for the dollar because the dollar crashed. So
I get it.
You can make the argument that tariffs, you can make the argument. I think the best argument you can make for tariffs is that you're trying to move manufacturing to the U.S., or you're trying to move manufacturing to, you're basically trying to move manufacturing to the U.S. and create U.S. jobs and manufacture with other companies investing in the U.S. There's a fundamental problem with that, which is as soon as you start messing with Mother Nature, and I talk about this all the time because the beauty of free markets is that you need other countries and you need other economies to participate in order for a global economy to expand. You can't do it solo. Everything moves together. Like the US Fed does not move without central banks now. The economy of the US cannot move solely by itself with no other economies following suit. It just doesn't work like that anymore. So there's everything's too closely integrated. So to say, oh, we're only going to do business with you if you do business here. Listen, are the rules, do we overpay? Yes. Are there unfair costs for US companies to go to other places? And the answer is yes, there are. But there's also access to capital in the US and access to US listed markets to raise capital. And there's far more opportunity in the US than there is anywhere else. And so for other places to be competitive, would we have, let me give you a couple of examples. Would we be where we are today, technology-wise, if it wasn't for technologists in other countries, like Taiwan, for example? Like, would we have the AI growth and the semiconductor growth if we weren't building chips in Taiwan or China? Would we have the intellectual capabilities that we have today if it wasn't for industry and education in other places around the world that we have helped to foster, invest in, and grow? It's not a one-off situation. You can't just simply argue that, oh, if it's back in America, we got this covered. Because would AI even be where it is today? Would quantum computing where it's going to be 10 years from now? Will it be 10 years? Will it be 5 years faster? I bet if you ask tech companies in Silicon Valley, they're like, don't slow down Taiwan. Don't slow down China. Don't slow down any other places around the world. Don't slow down India, because we need these places to generate the competition, to create, all the money that's been raised for AI. Just for example, in Silicon Valley, the trillions of dollars that have basically come to the marketplace are partially in place now because of what happened in Asia, speed to market wise.
Okay.
So let's not discount that. Let's not be foolish enough to discount that right up front and say, you know what? Make America great. Like do everything here or don't do anything, because you won't get it done. We'll fall behind the rest of the world. You're saying
the velocity of global capital is more important than any particular transaction or the fairness of any specific transaction. And you're saying to say that, like, just because whatever this one particular tariff on, or one particular transaction doesn't even be a tariff, but one particular thing is out of balance, doesn't mean that net that you're not performing in a way that's to your advantage. That being part of that imbalance is to your advantage.
Sure.
And as evidenced by the velocity of capital that can be assembled.
Ask. I wish Jensen Hung was on this discussion, and you can say to him, where would NVIDIA be today if it wasn't for access to different economies around the world? I'd love to ask Tim Cook the same question. Where would Apple be today if they couldn't build stuff in China and build stuff in other places around the world, including Taiwan and chips from all over? Where would any of these companies be? Where would Dell be? Where would where would IBM be? Let's stop being this so ethnocentric, so short-sighted, and so incapable of seeing what's going on in the world, because everything is not a political discussion. Everything is not just about lining your own pockets. It can't be.
But so, I mean, what is the biggest? So if the number one risk is with the bond, or excuse me, the number one risk is with the dollar, excuse me.
Is it with the dollar? Is the number one risk with the dollar? The dollar, who cares if the dollar goes a little bit lower? I mean, the argument's going to be lower dollar, cheaper to invest in the U.S.
So then what do you believe the number one risk is?
The number one risk is that we get disrupted. The number one risk is that right now we are the leaders of the free world. Okay? We police the free world. We support the welfare of the free world. Okay? We generate, basically, we're the foundation of the economy of the free world. The risk is that we lose that title. Now, some people are going to go, there's going to be a bunch of people. There's going to be a bunch of fiscal whack jobs that go, that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Now, screw them. We don't need to spend any money on them. Who cares about AIDS in Africa? Who cares about healthcare in Tanzania or wherever? Timbuktu. We don't care about the fact that there's no electricity in Mali, whatever, in Timbuktu. That's my whole point. It's very easy to say, why do I care? I care about what happens in rural Iowa or rural Alabama, whatever it is. But it's not that simple. And if you want to lead the technology revolution, and if you want to lead the decentralized charge, so that everything, ultimately, we maintain the center of liquidity here, we have to maintain that role as leader of the free world. In order to do that, we cannot just care about ourselves.
Yes, of course.
Because you have nutcases out there. You have crazy people like Putin. You have crazy people like him, other dictators that are probably a few steps away. Putin will be dead soon, but you have other dictators that still want to step up. And you have to be very careful, because you know what? It takes a joint effort. It's not just everybody flying solo. That is not a good thing.
Where are they going to go, though, Tom? You know, I mean, I think that it's like it goes back. It's almost like the quantitative easing, where it's like,
sure,
the U.S. has so much economic leverage. Are they really going to go to China? Are they really going to go to Russia? Europe can't even agree on a language. I mean, Europe can't even agree on a time of day. You know, how are they going to? Are they going to really? Do they really understand how hard it is and how difficult it is? You know, to take that kind of a leader, to take that kind of a leadership.
Every single company that has said throughout the years, where are they going to go? You know, in the old days, that was a very difficult. That was a really good question. Today, things are cheap. I mean, I know it sounds like, you know, but where was NVIDIA 10 or 15 years ago? You know, it's a different world now. You can build stuff without the cost, without the infrastructure cost to all the technology. Anybody can be a disruptor. Anybody can come to the plate. You know, I mean, I don't know where it's going to be from. I don't know. But I'm going to tell you that disruption is, it's not something that I don't rule it out. You know, and it's not you don't need a big number to do some real disruption. Like, we're not talking about, you know, you just have to do a little damage to our GDP and the whole country goes into free fall because you can't service your debt. You know, there's a lot of things that happen, and you got to be very careful about that.
Because the point is, once you lose it, you never get it back.
That's right. And, you know, there's a lot of other things that are important. You can't just, the world's not just a simple bottom line. It doesn't work like that. We've had this discussion. It's not just the plus or minus of today. You're saying it's not just whether I got $5 from you or you got $5 from me today. That's right. It's about whether I can trust you for the next 30 years of my life as a partner. Because things, or even the next things take a little time to build, and everything needs to be done. You know, you need to work together nowadays. Again, I get back to this globalization argument. Globalization, tokenization, digitization, these are not just words. Decentralization. All of these words, okay, this is our future. It's going to happen fast too. In the world of AI and machines and quantum computing coming right around the corner within the next decade, stuff's going to happen. Shit's going to happen overnight. You know, nobody's going to be immune. This is not like 3D printing where you're thinking, oh, I can print anything, anywhere, anytime, so everything's covered manufacturing-wise. That's not what this is. This is a whole different world. We're way past that. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, how alarmed are you right now in terms of real immediate risk? 1. But 1 is a lot more than 0. Right. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at a 1. So I'm not that alarmed right now. But what does scare me, but it's a risk that didn't even exist a minute ago, is the point. It's a risk that I didn't feel existed a year ago or 2 years ago. You know, what scares me is that there's more support. Is that I don't know if people, I just don't like it when we A, can't debate, and B, when everybody listens to somebody for the sole purpose because they don't want to lose their status or their job. It's a horrible situation. I mean, it's almost, you know, it's bad. It's anti-American. Period. Do you think that the policymakers in the United States are concerned about the weakening of the dollar? No. Or any of the financial metrics of any of the financial metrics? No, the policymakers in the U.S. right now are market structure and financially illiterate, literally illiterate. There's not even, I'm not talking just on. But not even Howard Lutnick or Scott Bassett or any of these people. I mean, do you think Howard Lutnick has a say in anything? Sold. That's the thing. I don't know that he does. Sold. Yeah. I'll sell that. I'll sell any of those guys. I just don't think there's a person that has a say.
would you get? I mean, this is again because would you originate? Are you more bullish on India or China because of what's happening?
I would. It's very hard for me to say. I just don't know how bad the situation is in India with respect to. I don't know how much bureaucracy. My experience dealing with Indian regulators. I've never dealt with the Indian government. I've only dealt with Indian regulators, securities regulators. My experience dealing with securities regulators in India is one of the worst you can imaginable. Like it's so bad. I can't even describe how bad it is in India. But it's more of a legacy platform than it is, a willingness to change. In China, I just don't have any experience, so I can't say. I've never done business in China, and we don't have any experience with, Chinese regulators or anything like that. So I can't answer that question. From the outside looking in, I'd say the Chinese government is more dangerous than the Indian government, and I'd say the Indian regulators are worse than the Chinese regulators from the outside looking in.
How much? 22 point some odd percent of the people in America voted for the current administration. 21 point some odd percent voted for the opponent, and then everybody else didn't vote, basically, because they don't want anything to do with it. Right. I take a little bit of hope in that when I see policies, by the way, from either side, where the Democrats do something crazy or the Republicans. I'm like, honestly, this is not what most people really want. This is just what the sort of extremist leadership of one or the other parties is saying that they want for whatever their reasons may be.
I mean, that's always been the case, though, Dylan. We're always.
No, I know. I know it's always been the case. But what I'm getting at is to the degree to which markets, like, for instance, I forget who is the crazy prime minister, Liz Truss, the 3-week prime minister in England, who wanted to do some crazy tax thing, and the bond market in England flipped over on her and she was done. Do you believe that the markets are in a position where if the American policies became so out of whack that there are enough people in leadership in New York, in Chicago, in the finance world, whether it's at the banks, the BlackRock, or JP Morgan, the New York Stock Exchange, wherever the power lies these days with the financial institutions, whatever, that if the American policies become full cuckoo bananas, whatever that even means at this point, that the financial markets are a corrective force. The first thing that Mike Bloomberg used to say to us when we were 23-year-old junior reporter at Bloomberg was, everybody, it's all fun and games until the bond market decides you're done, and that ultimately the bond market dictates what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, not just in the financial world, but even in the policy world.
I worry about that less with Trump than I would with somebody else. Like a different type of radical agenda would scare me more than Trump's agenda. And the reason being is that most of first of all, I consider him to be a capitalist, a hardcore capitalist. And
Trump.
And so I don't think he wants to mess with that. And I also consider his largest supporters and largest contributors to be very much hardcore capitalists. Like they run large financial institutions, like you're talking about, BlackRock and Blackstone and
Goldman and Morgan and
Goldman, Morgan, Citadel, Susquehanna. These are the biggest players.
These guys, Ken Griffin is a big Trump, big Republican.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Yaz, Ken Griffin, just the whole gang. These are the hardest core, financial people in the world. I don't think that. I think that I don't. So I don't worry about that with Trump. He's got a hardcore.
But the dollar getting shellacked is not nothing.
I don't think they care as much about the dollar getting shellacked because a cheaper dollar contributes to what their objectives are, bringing back investment in the U.S. If companies can come here and it's cheaper for them to come here because their currency is worth more, then, and you know, it's cheaper to move money to the U.S. right now. It's cheaper. You're buying cheaper dollars.
So that a weaker dollar brings capital flows from Europe, from China.
Yeah,
it's easier to, you get more dollars for your yuan or your euro or your yen.
Everything. I mean, a cheaper dollar, you know, and I don't even think the dollar's cheap. I think the dollar's just getting.
No, I said it's all relevant. I mean, of course.
Yeah, it's all relevant.
But your point is that, I see what you're saying. Your point is they don't a weaker dollar is not as a positive, not a negative, or could be construed as a positive through this policy framework in a way that weaker NASDAQ or a spike in rates would not.
Yeah. Trump's team's not looking at a weaker dollar going, oh my God, we got to make the dollar stronger. I don't think that's even. I don't even think that's part of the conversation. You know.
Got it.
I mean, there's no question that they would prefer to have lower interest rates when they have to refinance debt. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But I don't really think the dollar matters that much.
Do you think that what I'm really fascinated by is this obvious tension between the hyper integration. Like there's going to be the crypto is going to hyper integration. Like generationally, the younger the human beings are, the more they're less nationalistic and more connected with their friends from Instagram in Canada or Mexico or Brazil or in Spain or Japan or whatever. Like the whole thing is less.
Which is more crazy, which is the hypocrisy of this whole thing, especially with Trump, because on the one hand, he's a supporter of digital assets, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain, and that whole movement, the whole decentralized movement. I mean, he's clearly supporting that, no question about it. But the decentralization on a global scale essentially means allowing technology to engage more people, because technology is the great equalizer. So technology engages more people and brings way more people into the economic pot. That's the whole purpose. It brings people into politics. It brings people into different economies. It levels the playing field. It opens up all the borders. That's the beauty of decentralization, is involving everybody and just changing the game. You don't have to have a gazillion dollars to enter the game. That's the whole Solana. That's Cardano. That's everything about Ether. Same thing. It's everything these guys have been talking about, all the founders. And yet it goes completely counter to make America great again and close our ecosystem and become, with some form of isolationist policy. Makes no sense.
And it just feels like, to me, it's going to create some big tension. The conflict like that creates tension.
Well,
and in this case, I actually feel like it's going to be crypto positive, because the one way you work around tariff transactions is with crypto transactions.
Yeah. But
I mean, crypto, I guess that's not really the truth.
But crypto's a technology, and it's not the kind of thing where you can say, okay, only in the US. Like, that's not the whole point of decentralization. So I don't understand how you can have it both ways. And I think it is important to be, it is important for us to be leaders of the free world, and protectors of the free world, and to provide welfare to the free world. I think that is important. That's an obligation of living at the top of the food chain. You get all the other benefits.
A realist would say that was fine between 1989 and 2025, but it's over. I
mean, no. A realist would say that actually works, and we just have to we have to continue to improve things and do things better. But to try to change things and go back in a different direction is incredibly difficult and dangerous.
And that danger manifests in unquantifiable economic risk that we cannot identify at this time?
Well, no, but you're empowering your greatest competitors you're basically empowering your greatest competitors to go after you.
Meaning Russia, China,
everybody.
And you're turning you're turning your allies into adversaries.
Exactly.
That's the other thing.
You know the old saying, keep your enemies close.
Yeah, of course. But it's also interesting to turn Canada and Western Europe into an adversary is an interesting policy decision.
Keep your enemies close. That's always, keep your competitors close. And keep your competitors close and you'll be in great shape. Piss your competitors off and everybody's coming for you.
How are you trading these past few days? I know you gave me your dollar comment, but are you fiddling with the NASDAQ?
Yeah,
Have you been short? Were you short coming into this?
Yeah, but I'm just a trader. Traders are. I'm a trader monkey. I'm. My view of the world with a conversation with you is not how I trade. I can't trade thinking that 13 years from now we screwed this thing up, or 4 years from now. I mean, I'm trading from where things were priced this morning to where things are closing this afternoon. I can't have I don't take a long-term macro view of anything. I just trade them.
No, but how are you trading this?
Right now, we're really just selling a lot of premium because, the volatility is so high. We're flat deltas selling a lot of premium. That's kind of the way I see this thing.
Got it. Okay. It's an opportunity to sell vol and don't get tangled up in the direction either way.
Yeah, try to keep it a little bit close to the vest and don't get too tangled up. Exactly right.
Does that include oil and all the rest of it? I mean, is across the board? My best thing is I was short oil coming in. It's the only thing that worked for me last year. It's the only thing that worked for me this year. The equities, I stopped fiddling around with it because it always just ends disastrously for me, honestly.
Crude oil's been a little bit of a free fall, but you know what? Crude oil being in a free fall is good for this administration, because if you get lower gas prices at the pump, you have a much better story to tell. I think what people don't understand is nobody control it's not like Trump or anybody else can control gas prices. Joe Biden couldn't control gas prices. Trump's not going to control gas prices. No president controlled gas prices. So, I mean, with oil at 66, sure, gas is going to be cheaper than with oil at 76, and hopefully oil drops into the 50s, and they've got a good story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how they're spinning. Let's say, we did them.
No, of course, I get it. Yeah, I got you. But at the end of the day, deglobalizing at the peak of at the most globalized moment in the history of the world is impossible. I would think it's an impossible task. I mean, I guess Russia made it, long after 1945 or 1960, whenever they did it, 1945, made it illegal to leave the country. East Berlin. I'm in Berlin now. I went over to Checkpoint Charlie this morning. You forget that they were on August 13th, 1961. They're like, nobody leaves.
I know.
Like, no joke. I mean, not that we're, that just saying when the political movement towards restricted movement, in this case, it's restricted movement of goods and services, but restricting movement is something that governments do.
It never works.
And it never ends well.
It never ends well. He who isolates himself, he who doesn't take care of those around them, he who is not charitable, he who does not act in good faith, I'm not getting all religious or anything, but these are the people that end up, it doesn't work.
In a bad place.
That's right. All right, Mr. Radigan, a great discussion today. I didn't know you were going this direction.
This is high global politics. This is the highest level of this is the destiny of the future of the world, sir.
I did not know we were going this direction today, but I like it. I'm Tom Sosnoff. Right. He's Dylan Radigan. Every Wednesday, Truth or Skepticism. Thanks for spending the last 40 minutes with us. Thanks, Dylan.
All right. See you in a week.